How far are you willing to go, Michael?
It's a story about outcasts, belonging, and the seductive pull of the vampire. Based on the 1987 cult film, The Lost Boys has arrived on Broadway and was greeted with 12 Tony nominations. On this episode of Theater All the Moving Parts, we go inside the making of the most nominated musical of the season. Welcome. I'm Patrick Pacheco. When director Michael Arden and scenic designer Dane Laffrey collaborated on Maybe Happy Ending, Broadway took notice with the Tony Award for Best Musical. Now they're back together and have gone epic. The Lost Boys is set in the shadow-filled world of Santa Carla, California, where a family in search of a fresh start stumbles into a town overrun by vampires. The riveting story demanded a domestic cosmology, dazzling aerial choreography, a versatile and shifting three-story set, and a vision bold enough to fill every inch of it. Michael Arden is a two-time Tony Award winner and fearless risk-taker, and Dane Laffrey is a Tony-winning scenic designer whose work here has been called a mechanical marvel. Together they conceived a production unlike anything currently on Broadway. Michael, Dane, welcome to Theater All the Moving Parts. And whatever possessed you to take on this incredible challenge of adapting this 1987 cult film to the stage?
Well, possession is a good word for it.
How could we say no?
Yeah, I got emailed or called in the early summer 2021 saying, listen, these three producers who are new producers and new to producing, but names that I had known for a long time, Patrick Wilson, James Carpinello, and Marcus Chait, who were college chums at Carnegie Mellon, had always loved The Lost Boys and had gotten the rights to do it on stage as a musical, and would I be interested in working on it? And like everything, I immediately call my partner, Dane Laffrey, and I say, what do you think of this idea? And neither of us had seen the film. So we watched it and thought, well, this is impossible, which is usually something that makes us want to tackle something, is when we feel it's impossible, we feel like, oh, well, then we better try. And it just felt like a really exciting opportunity to make something in the musical theater that we haven't seen before. Tonally, we've never seen an adventure, horror, comedy, family drama. It's such a tonally complex piece, which is, I think, why it's such a cult classic. It's kind of like 5 movies in one. Yeah. And it felt like a really exciting opportunity to do something new, to give audiences a real thrill, and ultimately to surprise ourselves along the way.
As what you just said, it's so many different things. I mean, it's horror, it's comedy, it's a love story, it's romance, it's dark and very light. How did you navigate that minefield?
I think it was about kind of, dancing on the blade a little bit. We had to kind of like a tightrope walk. Like if we ever stay too far in or too long in one kind of genre or tone, we needed to make sure there was balance, which when you see the show, which is why we kind of embrace how ridiculous the vampires can be, or the trope of vampires can be, so that the actual vampires in the show can be scary.
Horror and suspense is incredibly difficult to adapt to the stage, and there are innumerable examples of people that have failed to do that. How did you find that you possibly could create a sense of suspense, especially given the silliness that might come into?
Well, I mean, I think we learned a lot from our production of A Christmas Carol, which we did on Broadway with Jefferson Mays by himself. Is that was something that really embraced the darkness and really had some super scary stuff in it. And I think I believe our producers saw that production, and that was maybe.
I think that was why they reached out to us,
because that show was able to do a thing, I think, successfully that, as you say, is quite hard on stage, where we were able to actually pull people into this world and just scare the crap out of them sometimes. And that is a texture that, as Michael said, is one of the many modes that we have to just like kind of put in the Lost Boys hopper and keep moving between. But it is where we start the show, and I think is important because it is kind of the hardest thing to land. And I think introducing the audience to the world through the modality of suspense and tension and a jump scare and something that feels like legitimately scary, and then they're able to also kind of laugh at how scared they were, feels like the right kind of like, you know, emotional starting point for the story. Yeah.
And your set dances among these elements. I mean, there is a boardwalk with a carnival, there is a mosh pit, there's a rock setting, there is a pier, there's under the pier. It just absolutely covers so much territory. How did you make it quite so versatile, and how did you make it dance?
Well, gosh, I mean, you know, we knew we needed it to be the kind of like base, this factory, as you say, this old ironworks, to be a place that is fundamentally very, very mercurial and that we can consistently redefine. So, you know, a lot of what we're doing, and it's exactly the same thing that the lighting is doing, is like showing you just enough that you then can start to project your way, like, you know, down the arcades and down the hallways with the arches. You go like, oh, I see, you know, I just see enough there. I see a little sandwich board that's some weird psychic set up there, and some, you know, a lady smoking a cigarette on a folding chair, and I'm like, oh great, I kind of know a lot about what's going on there and what's going on around the corner, and you just fill in the blanks, because actually we're not necessarily doing that much in service of the entire show, because we have to visit so many places and it moves so cinematically.
And there's only so much real estate
exactly.
in a Broadway theater, even one like the Palace.
It's always finite. It's always less space than you think it is. And so the idea, especially in this world, that, you know, one important image for us, which we do conjure in the show, is that, you know, when they first arrive at the house and things, you know, things are not good with the family, and Michael's like, I gotta get out of here, and he starts to, you know, sing this first big like rock number, Lose Yourself, and the whole world just drops away. He's like standing in the middle of the living room, and then it all just like drops away around him and vanishes from above and kind of in every direction. And so you know, it has this instability and a sort of energy and a thrill. Like that's not just about like, well, how do we get the sofa off stage? There's some more to it than that. And the way that I think we like come and go from these locations does the magic in it speaks to the kind of like, or starts to speak as we get further into the story about the kind of like where we're at psychologically with this person who is, you know, experiencing, you know.
Also, we're just responding to an incredible score.
What I found fascinating about the aerial choreography, that the second time that I saw it, was how much it was tied to each individual character. How did you work with your aerial choreographers, Lauren and Cree, to achieve that specificity in how they moved?
Well, we knew that the flying needed to be connected to joy and freedom for these characters, that ultimately, you know, they say the old trope in a musical, when words aren't enough, you sing, and when singing is enough, you dance. I suppose when dancing isn't enough, you fly here. And you know, we're calling upon the name of the piece, The Lost Boys, this Peter Pan idea of freedom, of youth, of kind of a return to childhood, one that our main character Michael never had. So flight represents something incredibly beautiful and meaningful for this character. And we knew that the flying, you know, they wouldn't be able to fly 60 miles an hour and murder people that way, so that flying needed to represent something incredibly special and beautiful and ultimately venerable. Of course, they're trying to make Michael a vampire, but they want to do so, and David wants to do so because he doesn't want to be alone, because he wants a family just like Michael does. He wants to belong to someone and with someone. So in a way, it's like, you know, even though vampires do kill you, you know, they have to, but everyone is doing this because of the cycle of trauma they've been through. I mean, everyone's just trying to survive in a way, which I think is useful. That there's no, like, you know, it's not so black and white with what villainy is.
Oh, that's right.
In the story.
Are you making a point, because it starts with Ronald Reagan, and just say no morality of the 1980s? Are you making the political point that has its own moral quandary?
I think
Well,
so.
of course,
I mean, I
yeah.
think there was such a, you know, focus on the family, but as one certain definition.
That's right,
of
in an
family.
incredibly binary way.
Yeah.
The family is this thing. To fail at the family is this thing.
Yeah, a mother and a father raising children in the biological way. And hopefully what we move toward and what we interrogate over the course of the evening is like, how can you create a family that isn't that? That are people moving in the same direction with a common goal and who want to be accepted no matter how unlike their siblings they might be.
It's a complex notion, and I think that's the juxtaposition we're interested in against the sort of like simplicity and kind of like unfulfillable idealism that Reagan is trying to like present to us. That like that's not a realistic way or a modern way to think about how you want to belong to something.
There is something very moving about a sibling relationship in the musical, obviously, between Sam and Michael that is kind of hard fought and hard won. Yeah. You mentioned the tonal shifts that happen in the musical, and even though this is a dark tale and blood is gleefully spilt, there is also a moment when there's a musical comedy trope that you introduce in the song Superpower. Talk about that tonal shift and how it sort of came about.
Well, I mean, you know, Sam is a kind of like wonderful person who is discovering things about himself and discovering an important thing that like the things that make us different are the things that make us stronger. Mm-hmm. And that is where our power lies. And so, you know, there's this sort of like, and the realization that you know, comes for him in Act 2, that like, you know, because he sees things differently, because he notices things that other people don't notice, that has unlocked, you know, their ability to like seek out the vampires and maybe hope vanquish them, and you know, it turns into this like incredibly like gleeful, delightful moment that where, you know, the world, his world of the, you know, he's a kind of comic book obsessed 15-year-old, 14-year-old.
And we wanted to explore the imagination of a kid. Mm-hmm. That you know, you sort of, that oftentimes one's best support is one's imagination, and it becomes that in the song Superpower. The superheroes lift him up, literally.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you that this is your 7th collaboration, and you've created a company at Rise Creative.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that collaboration, and also because as part of their portfolio, technology. You know, storytelling using the technology that is most available to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, so At Rise is our producing venture together, right? And we formed it because we felt there was a peculiar distance between the creative side of making a Broadway show and the producing side. And that's just not happening in the theater space so much, and we kind of wondered why. And so we, you know, started, Parade was our first project that we, you know, were co-producers on, and we're on Maybe Happy Ending. We had certainly a significant stake in The Lost Boys,
but also looking to support artists we find are pushing the boundaries of theater. We co-produced Sunset Boulevard, Jamie Lloyd's production, which we were very excited.
Saw in London and thought was amazing.
Thought it was very worthy, and so it's been really exciting to get to start this and think, okay, how can we create theater in a way that is that the artistic and the producerial are in a kind of closer
where the distance is collapsed, and it lets us then. I think you know, we always need new models. We need new ways of working, right? And in constantly attempting to innovate how the Broadway musical is made, or how theater is made, and what are, you know, the models, and that's sort of part of what it is.
Well, congratulations on all the rewards that are coming your way, and I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thanks for talking about theater.
Yeah.
The challenge of playing a vampire on stage has defeated numerous seasoned performers, as the history of Broadway attests. Breaking that curse is Ali Louis Bourzgui, who has earned a Tony nomination for his role of David, the charismatic, terrifying leader of the vampires, who makes a trip to the dark side irresistible. His is one of the most talked about performances of the season. Ali, welcome to the show, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated your performance as David.
Thank you so much.
As I did of Tommy when I first saw you, and you played Tommy at the tender age of 24.
Yeah.
And now you're all of 26.
Oh yeah, it's been a crazy 2 years.
Anyway, a critic in reviewing the show was captivated by what she called the mix of your gravitas and mischief. Oberon and Puck rolled into one.
Oh, that's
So where does the gravitas come from?
Well, you know, I have to say I love the Shakespearean reference. I feel like I got a lot of David does come from sort of classical theater in a lot of ways. But so maybe I'd say the gravitas is from there. There's a real trick to making him both very highly theatrical as well as really grounded and switching between that. I feel like the gravitas is sort of filling the space. There has to be a presence there. And Kiefer Sutherland, like I studied his performance in the movie and he had the same thing. It was sort of everyone around you is buzzing, but you are a solid rock in the middle of the ocean. And like David is just still and certain, and the power comes from the stillness. But at the same time, the puck, the mischief comes from being that solid state thing. And then at any moment that could change and you never know what's gonna come from this guy next. And so I played a lot with how at the flip of a switch, he could suddenly be really like a clown, and he's like playing with people, and then all of a sudden he's really serious, and then he's making a joke, and he just can never land on where he's at.
You obviously were called in, I think, for Michael, but you really actively campaigned to play David. Why?
Yeah, I was actually auditioning for both originally. It was kind of I kept going in for both characters, and I was really drawn to David for a few reasons. I knew it would be more fun. I mean, LJ has a blast, but I just mean for me, I specifically knew that I was going to have more fun, but also have more of a challenge to play the villain. I haven't really gotten to do that in my career yet, so I knew that it would be a real switch up and it would give me something to work on of how to make a villain just as much of a full 3D person as any other character, and how to like kind of make the audience not always think that he's the antagonist too.
What kind of research did you do insofar as the role itself?
Literally, I listened to like vampirology podcasts, like the history of like folklore vampires, and just how it's just so interesting because our culture, and not just our culture, but like the worldwide culture has stuck to this vampire story for like centuries. And I think the question is always why? Why vampires? Why is that always something that we come back to? And I know you just talked to Michael Arden, and I'm sure he touched on this too, but we've both sort of talked about the fact that there is a vampire for every age, which basically means that vampires are a lens that humans can use to look at ourselves and examine the human condition through a sci-fi lens or an outward lens.
What was your favorite vampire movie that you
Let the Right One In is the Swedish incredible vampire film that I think really actually touches more on that same sort of thing instead of being like necessarily this is a horror movie. It's almost about the human condition and connection and the loss of connection. But at the same time, on the other side of that, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is one of the most fun movies I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's got to be up there as one of the best.
Why is David the leader of the vampires? Is it self-appointed, or did he kill to get it?
Well, he's been around much longer than the other guys. In my mind, he's in his late 90s, and he's been around since the late 1890s. I think he was born sometime in like 1890 or something like that. But these guys are a rebellion for him, he's trying to start a new life, I think. So he's got these three best friends of his, the other Lost Boys. I believe that he's turned all of them into vampires, and he's trying to create like a friend group and trying to get all these people to like, he's trying to force people to be his family.
Is it that pernicious in his relationship to Michael? Is he saving him for mortality, or is it a selfish reason?
I think it's a lot of things, and I also think he doesn't necessarily know. I think the power of David is the ambiguity. I think there is something so special about not always knowing what his motive is, and I think he doesn't even know what his motive is at all times. But yeah, he thinks that he can save people.
How aware is David of that immortality is not all that it's cracked up to be?
That's the number one thing he's running from. I think deep down he knows that. I think he knows, and he has known for a few years, that immortality is not what it's all cracked up to be, but he's trying to deny that. And I think at the end of the show, there's sort of a beautiful moment where he recognizes that the thing he actually really wants is to just finally let go, because the grasp that he's been holding on for so long is his downfall.
So death comes as a mercy.
I believe so.
How homoerotic is your relationship to Michael?
Well, I think it's so interesting again to look at this in the lens of what would, if you're a vampire gets to a certain point in their immortality when human rules don't apply. And I think David doesn't necessarily have a label for himself, but he is 100% attracted to both Michael and Star, but in multiple ways. I think he finds he's like romantically interested in them. It's this crazy combination of like wanting to be everything for them. But yeah, I personally think that David has always been queer, but he grew up in the early 1900s, so like I don't think he ever was able to explore that, and he sort of got stuck in that. And then once he's, now in the 80s when people are starting to explore that, I think there is something interesting about him even embracing like a different kind of hairstyle and these like clothes. Like there is something where he's like finally allowing himself to, but he's also like 100 years old and doesn't necessarily even need to have a label for himself. I think all vampires probably at a certain point forget about labels and sexuality in general, and just everything goes,
There's this moving moment, and you're singing it along with the other vampires. That's almost liturgical. It's a cappella. There's also a chalice there. Did you discuss with Michael and Dane the idea that there was this spiritual element to it that we see in movies like The Omen or The Exorcist, that there's this religious ritual involved in it?
All of us are one in that moment. And we have the entire cast backstage singing that a cappella section with us. So everyone in the theater pauses for that moment, and there's silence in the audience, and on stage the band stops playing, and the entire cast is singing this beautifully written a cappella piece written by the Rescues, our composers. And I find it to be hauntingly beautiful. Like I am so touched by that moment every night.
How did you find the physical language of David? Because he's both airborne, of course, but also on terra firma. Did that differ in terms of your physical language?
It's finding moments where he's athletic and a vampire and like has this power, and then moments when he remembers his years. And so that's the combination. I use a lot of snake sort of imagery and like the way that I sort of lead with my head, and there's sort of this slithery thing about him in order to keep him a bit creepy and untrustworthy. And in the air, it's great because I just kind of use my old ballet training. I was always good at the arms in ballet, but I was never good at the legs. So flying's perfect because it does the moving for me, and I can just kind of focus on the arms. But we have all these beautiful sweeping cello orchestrations that the Rescues wrote.
What was the kind of music that you grew up with? You grew up in Boston. You have one sibling, right?
Yep.
Two boys, born to a Moroccan father, Irish Catholic mother?
Yeah, Irish-Italian Catholic mom.
What kind of music did you hew to?
Yeah, I mean, a real amazing combo of things. Because my dad would always play different like classic music from Morocco. So I totally grew up with that sound, but at the same time, my parents both grew up in America in the 80s. So I listened to a lot of 80s music growing up, and a lot of Michael Jackson was always on in the house. So that was not bad to grow up with Stevie Wonder for sure. And my mom played Norah Jones a lot too.
As an Arab American, you've been very activist about, and also you grew up in a Muslim. Your father, Abdel Ali, grew up as a Muslim, and you observed Muslim holidays as well. What is important to you about getting the message out in terms of this Islamophobia that is going on right now?
Well, I think the answer to this and to like every oppressed group is you just have to give a voice to the voiceless. So for many years, and again, this is true of like every ethnic group in America, we have not been able to tell our own stories or like be the voice for our own mouths. We have been like prejudiced, and like the media has been like, this is what these people are, and this is how you should think of these people. And so Islamophobia is huge in this country because Arabs have just been seen for years and years and years as like the trigger word terrorists. And so I think it's very important for all Arab Americans for Arab Americans to be in media in general and to sort of show our face and be humanized and just be like, we are people deserving of love and life and yeah, it's just sort of, it's putting faces to the people, because when you're unknown, you can be hated. And I just want to spread that message that it is a beautiful culture, and people around the world of the Arab culture should not ever be collateral damage or seen as anything but human.
That vibe that you just described was very present in a play that I liked you very much in, that I saw down at the New York Theater Workshop, and that was We Live in Cairo. And it was about this group of activists who very bravely fought against Mubarak. A lesson for our time?
At the core of it, we need young people to stand up and be the change that we want to see. And so that's what that show is about, this group of Egyptian activists using their art to sort of fight the dictatorship.
And it was such a family as well, and you kind of circled the wagons, as I suppose the two families at the heart of Lost Boys do as well.
I think frequently that our show also kind of talks about how you can show up for like queer family members, and like, again, you can be a family and supportive, but you just let that person be who they want to be. And if you let someone blossom and truly give them the space to be themselves, it's the most beautiful thing in the entire world, and can benefit everyone. And I think if everyone was just allowed to truly just live their life the way they want to live it, the world would be a much better place.
We have to wrap up, but your father was not at first supportive of your choice of career. What brought him around?
I think it just, I think it's true. I've spoken to many people who have immigrant parents, and they all share the same story. My parent did not want me to do this. But it's because, I give them all grace because they moved to this country, worked tirelessly, worked tons and tons of these jobs that people, barely saw them in. And they did that so that I could have a future. And he spent all this time so that I could live my life in a certain way. And so he didn't think that art was necessarily a job where I could make money. But I think he turned around when I showed him that A, I could be successful in it, and B, I could use it to also like uplift our culture. And I always have my mom around, who's always been supportive. She's really been the best, and the reason I'm even sitting here is her.
Well, I'm sure that your immediate family and your extended family, both of them are proud of you. And I couldn't thank you enough for coming on Theater All the Moving Parts and for sharing this time with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
The Lost Boys is now playing at the Palace Theater on Broadway with 12 Tony nominations, including Best Musical. The 79th Annual Tony Awards are just days away on Sunday, June 7th at Radio City Music Hall. For more conversations like this, subscribe to the CUNY TV YouTube channel or download the CUNY TV app to watch all of our shows. I'm Patrick Pacheco, and we'll see you next time as the curtain rises on Theater All the Moving Parts. Happy Tonys, everybody.